I'm Arthi Pohl. We lead off with the escalating threats by U.S. President Donald Trump. This time, his demands to acquire Greenland. Those threats are testing the NATO alliance, which includes Canada. The White House wants to impose new tariffs on several EU countries over his demand to acquire Greenland. And this is drawing in Canada. Two senior Canadian officials tell CBC News that Prime Minister Mark Carney is considering sending soldiers to Greenland for military exercises with NATO allies. Carney just arrived in Switzerland minutes ago to attend the World Economic Forum in Davos. It is his last stop on a trip to strengthen Canada's global trade ties outside of the United States. And these are some of those images just into our newsroom moments ago of Carney arriving in Zurich, Switzerland. He will be heading off to Davos, where he will likely meet with his European counterparts and NATO allies. On the itinerary, he will be meeting with the president of France. We know that Trump's territorial ambitions are already overshadowing the agenda. The American president will be at the forum later on this week, lending even more urgency to this situation.
It's a serious situation, and we're concerned. We're concerned about this escalation, to be absolutely clear. We always will support sovereignty and territorial integrity of countries wherever their geographic location is.
Now, that was Prime Minister Mark Carney speaking yesterday in Doha on this situation. We know that the World Economic Forum goes until this Friday, and we'll bring you any developments as they come in to us. So we want to keep close on this story. All eyes are on the Prime Minister as he considers sending soldiers to Greenland. The stakes and tensions couldn't be higher. So for more insight on this, let's bring in retired General Thomas Lawson. He is a former Chief of the Defence Staff for the Canadian Armed Forces, and he joins us from Ottawa. Thank you for making time for us today.
Pleasure, Arthi.
So first, I want to ask you, General Lawson, should Canada send troops to Greenland?
Well, I think so. I think that the idea behind so many NATO members gathering small groups of troops and sending them to Greenland for this late-breaking and impromptu exercise, as they're calling it, is a clear rebuke to the United States. They're not sending soldiers in numbers that would actually defend bases and towns in Greenland from any true attack, but they are saying something very clear. I think our Prime Minister is walking a tightrope in what he does when you don't really want to be in the clear view of a bully, especially when there are big negotiations coming. But I think you do want to do what you have to do to stand up for your morals and integrities. And in this case, NATO is clearly behind, except for one member, Denmark and Greenland, and their sovereignty.
How dangerous or risky could this be if it's seen as a provocative move by the U.S. president?
Well, there's a couple of ways to look at that. For Canada, it could be very dangerous in an economic fashion. But for NATO, I think really you put your finger on it. It's much, much bigger. If I could use an analogy, if we considered NATO to be a ship, it's got a very big and existential threat on its eastern border. So this ship could potentially come under fire as a result of the illegal and horrific war being conducted by Russia in Ukraine right now. That's what should have the NATO ship's entire focus. But in fact, as this is happening, the ship has sprung a very minor leak. We would have called it minor leak months ago when President Trump was wistfully talking about owning Greenland. Hopefully that would have been dealt with some sort of small cork. But in fact, that small leak has now turned into a torrent of water on board this ship and taken all of the focus off the existential threat of the war in Ukraine and now focus it on something much, much different. And this has, of course, been to Russia's great glee and provided them space to carry out the war, perhaps to a conclusion that supports their goals.
There's so much to watch on all of this. And of course, you raise an important point when we talk about ongoing conflicts that NATO allies have been watching. When it comes to the prospect of Canada considering sending troops to participate in these military exercises, I'm wondering if you can talk to me a little bit about the current presence of the Canadian Armed Forces in the Arctic and about the security role that is played.
Right. Well, to my knowledge, we have no permanent presence in Greenland, although we do use the main bases there on our way up to resupply alert. And often we will take part in exercises there. In fact, I understand we have F-18s there right now taking part in an exercise that was planned months ago. So although there is no permanent presence there, there is an openness on behalf of Denmark and Greenland to all NATO allies to use their bases at will. That's why this entire crisis is so unnecessary. Everything that the United States needed to increase security in the Arctic and in the North was already there under agreements signed between the United States and Denmark as far back as 1951. Those openness and those open bases are exercised by allies like Canada frequently.
You know, we've been seeing reports specifically talking about Donald Trump focusing in on the Western Hemisphere. And specifically, we know that NBC News, for example, is reporting that Trump is privately increasing complaints to aides about Canada's vulnerability to U.S. adversaries in the Arctic because of what he perceives as the weak defense systems existing within Canada. What do you make of those vulnerabilities and the prospect of the conversations that are happening behind closed doors involving the U.S. president?
Well, first of all, as a former defense chief, I think NATO and NORAD focus on the North is very appropriate. But it can be done. It can be carried out under the auspices of NATO agreements and in North America, is what you're pointing to, under the NORAD agreement, which is North American Air Defense, been around for 65 years. And it looks not only after aerospace defense, but also maritime awareness. So within that structure, I think it's very appropriate that Canada and the United States up their game. I think that Canada really has done very little to bolster our claim to sovereignty since it was given to us over 100 years ago. I think Prime Minister Harper, when I was Chief of Defense Staff, used to go up there to various bases and locations regularly with an idea that Canada would invest more in the North, and we never really did that. I think we are now. I think in the last couple of years, our game has really been upped in terms of satellites are about to take off and provide 100% communications and satellite reconnaissance up there, unmanned aerial vehicles. We've just purchased on the way to purchase a land vehicle that will cross terrain up there more easily. So the focus that we should have been giving to the Arctic all along is underway. The question is that happening quickly enough to assuage the concerns of the president? And if not, I think there's a real strategic vulnerability there. And that is a potential claim by the United States that that's their territory, that they're sovereign over.
You know, I finally wanted to ask you, in terms of the way that you are viewing what has gone on since the start of 2026, when we watch what unfolded in Venezuela, now these threats against Greenland and its sovereignty, how do you view that when it comes to Canada's security?
Well, I think Canada's security hangs in the balance. Our primary alliance is with the United States under the North American Aerospace Defense Command. And I think things were well underway before the start of this year to bolster that. NORAD modernization has been on the government's front burner for a couple of years now. So that was all good. But as things get shaken between our key partner and us, that all hangs in the balance. And even more importantly, our big international alliance is NATO. And that's the most successful alliance probably in the history of the modern world. And it's being shaken to its very core right now, too. So I think the two agreements that Canada most cares about have been shaken up in a way that should concern Canadians across the nation. and should bolster their confidence that this current government is raising defense investments finally to levels that Canada has not seen for decades.
General Lawson, I want to thank you very much for your time and your insights today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Arthi.
That is retired General Tom Lawson, and he is a former Chief of the Defence Staff for the Canadian Armed Forces, and we reached him today in Ottawa.